And the Minnesota Department of Commerce. We greatly appreciate the leadership that you have exhibited, that you've been doing for all these years, and particularly in the broadband area. It's an honor for me to serve as the Commerce Commissioner in Minnesota. It's for me, an opportunity to make a difference in people's lives. I grew up thinking about what the world would look like when I was a kid, and every night I have a conversation with my children. They're thinking about the same and what the future will be for them and for all of us here in this room today. So I was delighted. We came up early. I wanted to make sure I saw some of the comments in the panel before me. But every day it's a chance for me at the department to think about the ways that Minnesota can make or the Department of Commerce can make a difference in all of our lives in Minnesota. Now, at the department, we not only regulate telecommunications, but we regulate the energy sector, we regulate the banking sector, we regulate insurance, financial services, securities, 20-plus industries, including real estate. And many of the comments that I heard today talked about the economy, talked about the digital literacy, talked about financial literacy. And all of those things are important to me, and they're on my mind as I look at the things that I need to do. Every night, though, I go home and I talk to my kids, and the biggest priority for me is to take that moment to spend time with them. They're now 6, 11, and 9 years old. And I remember when I was that age, and if you all can remember that, at that time, back in the late 60s and early 70s, when I was in 3rd grade, we used to be able to connect to a computer by using one of those big fat modems. You took the phone, you plugged it in, and then off you were. And I remember connecting up to Chicago and being able to play some computer game, and it was just amazing at that time. And then I think about when I go into the schools, and the schools that my kids are at, and they have screens, not this big, but they have huge screens up where they teach the kids right there on the internet. They interface the teachers now with the kids. Each of the schools in our school districts have iPads. And Brent, we're going to talk about this. You stole my line in terms of using the iPad. But here I am today using an iPad, being able to talk to you about the internet. And they are in the classroom now teaching kids with iPads and these smart screens, and it's just a phenomenal experience. The reality is that we no longer live in the era built by Alexander Graham Bell. We don't. We now live in an era built by Bill Gates, by Steve Jobs, by all of us who have thought of what this internet and the broadband and the global economy is all about. Minnesota, the nation, and the world economy is now built on at a speed that was never conceived of before. Governor Dayton often says, and he's working hard to make Minnesota work at the speed of commerce. Now, I could appreciate that as a compliment, but I think he means commerce with a small c, not a capital C. But I know what he really means is that we are focused in the administration on how we can make Minnesota continue to grow out of the recession, how we can make Minnesota keep up with the speed of commerce in the high-tech global economy. The governor understands that it's crucial, that it's foundational, that it's part of the effort we build on broadband access. That we make sure that there's accessibility, affordability, that adoption is there, and that the speeds that we need for Minnesota's economy are here in Minnesota to support business growth, fuel the economy, and develop and create jobs here in Minnesota. It's not a new concept to the governor. Bernadine mentioned that I spoke right at the beginning of the administration about border-to-border broadband. We all have talked about ubiquity and making it accessible to people. But the idea of making it for all 4 corners of the state and from every border around the state in Minnesota as a priority is absolutely critical. It was a campaign promise that the governor worked on. The administration is focused on the importance of making it border to border and how we can continue to develop, make economic development a high priority, and in particular for job creation. But at his side, he also has the lieutenant governor. who, as everybody knows, from Duluth, who focused on broadband development when she was a state senator. So with Lieutenant Governor Yvonne Predner-Solon, who extends her welcome here to the city. Her leadership is obvious, and it's been there, and there's a strong commitment. She worked on the ultra-high-speed Broadband Task Force initiative. She was an author of broadband development and putting into the statutes the goals that Minnesota has. They're exceptionally aggressive goals, but at the same time, they're necessary. They're goals that need to be looked at. On October 26th, the news in Minnesota was that the governor had a job summit. And we talked about a lot of ways in which we can help build and develop jobs in Minnesota. It was led by a lot of folks who are thinking about every day what we can do to make jobs. There were panels and discussions, and one of the panels that we had was on infrastructure. And it was myself, Commissioner of Transportation, and we all sat down and talked about what it was that Minnesota's infrastructure needs were for the 21st century. Well, the topic that I focused on was broadband, because broadband is like our highway system is and was, but it's also the highway, as everybody has said, to the global economy. It's the highway to the infrastructure, and it's not lost on any of us. So on November 7th, culminating some of the work that we've been focusing on for broadband, the Governor Dayton, announced the appointment of a 15-member task force specifically on broadband. It's built on, and it's meant to build on the work that's been done before in the past on the ultra-high-speed task force, and to make sure that we continue at the state level to focus on the state policy for broadband development. The task force was established by an executive order that was signed in August. We worked on drafting it, which has, in addition to the task force, two other major features. One of them was to dedicate within the Department of Commerce our staff and build or put in place a box around this and say there's an Office of Broadband Development. And the focus is on development. I remember the conversation in the governor's office. We were talking about the executive order and how it was going to play itself out. And I just want to share with you some of the slides. I talked about everything we were doing in the Department of Commerce, and one of the most important things he wanted to focus on for most of the hour was broadband, and how we were going to develop border-to-border broadband and what we were going to do. We talked about planning and sketching and doing things and all the things that you're doing and working with the private sector. But one of the key things he wanted to make sure was that we were focused on development. Not planning, but development. Making sure that it happens in Minnesota. So the task force, as we looked at, let me tell you about the third thing that we did, and I'll get a little bit more into this, is that we also established a sub-cabinet within the administration. So that we, the entire cabinet, the sub-cabinet and the governor, had 3 cabinet members focus on broadband policy for the state of Minnesota. So, focusing on the task force, it is now charged with developing the policies at the state level and to continue on those policies of what Minnesota needs to do to develop broadband in Minnesota at the state public policy level. The members that we looked at represent a balance of interests. We were very focused on making sure that there was diversity, not only with respect to businesses and residential users, but also educational institutions, healthcare institutions, sort of the traditional telephone companies, the cable and the wireless representatives, to make sure that we had those folks involved, but also local and metro area governments, and to make sure that we had geographic diversity so that it came with a variety of voices to develop our concepts. And it comes down to this. The governor has a sign in his door. It was in Governor Purvich's office at one time, and it basically says that none of us is as smart as all of us. And he takes that approach not only with what we do in the administration, but he also reaches out when we go out and talk to people, and all of us are saying this, is that we cannot do it alone, that we all need to work together. That all of us in this room, all of us in the broadband community, all of us in Minnesota need to work together on building broadband development. The task force will be tasked to make sure that we do an assessment, basically a gap analysis, and to say where have we been, where's Minnesota today? And building on what was talked about in the panel just now, What is broadband? What is the internet? What is all of us going to look like in 20 years from now? It's hard to envision, but at the same time, we know that in 5, 10 years from now, we will need to build out the infrastructure. We're going to need to build up the adoption, and we're going to need to meet the demands of Minnesota. So what are the things that we will need, and what are the things that we need for our homes, for our businesses? What do we need in our regional centers, every city, every township? What do we need to get health care accessible to rural communities? All of the great things that we can do, whether it's a refrigerator or whether it's you're accessing your doctor or some provider to get the medical care you need today or tonight, 11 o'clock at night when you need to help your kids. And those are the things that we're focused on and asking the broadband or the task force to do. With all that information, we will ask them to specifically come up with an action plan, specific items that we can do, whether that's legislative, whether there's barriers that need to be tackled, whether there's other things that need to be done, and obviously working with all of you is an important thing. I also want to recognize, as I talked about, the development of the broadband office. But at the Department of Commerce, we've had staff that have worked on broadband development on the technology or on the telecommunications side for a long time. So with us today, I'd like to just recognize some of our staff. We have Diane Wells, who many of you know, or all of you know, who's worked in the broadband area. We also have Greg Fetter. He's our IT guru at the department. He works with the Office of Enterprise Technology and makes sure that the Department of Commerce is working at the speed of what we need to do for keeping up with the pace of industry. And we also have Peter Brickweedy, who works in government relations. And Peter, as many of you know, has worked in Minnesota State Senate and on policy development. So the other part about all of this is we've developed a sub-cabinet. And the sub-cabinet, again, is the Minnesota Department of Commerce and LEAD, but in working in conjunction with the Office of Enterprise Technology and as well the Department of Economic Development. Because as relatively lead agencies, these are the three folks that the governor wanted to make sure were focused on this in terms of what broadband needs are. But it's not just our agencies, as all of you know, it's many agencies. It's the Department of Education that touches on it, the Department of Agriculture that touches on broadband. So all of the agencies have in one, the Department of Transportation. I can forget and leave some out, but we're all working together on what Minnesota needs in its IT infrastructure, both on the public side, but also on the private side, and what we can do to build and develop it.